Executive of Electronic Arts. So, welcome.
Great to be here. Right.
Yeah. So, why don't we start with this dive into data we've been doing lately and what you've been finding out about the state of the game industry.
So, something I don't normally do, I've noticed this morning. The reason is I'm going to give you some data, some numbers. I tend to think that it's pretty easy to pontificate or kind of get out there with a whole lot of opinions about the game industry. But the information that's available, I think, sheds some light on some important questions. So before I do this, I'm going to thank a few folks, Magid, SuperData, ESA, and most of the game companies and retailers that have announced their results recently have been able to, or willing to give me a few key insights. So let me just start with some numbers. So currently, the console market, the software console market, is about a $25 billion business. The PC free-to-play business is about a $6.5 billion business. Casual social web is about a $6 billion business. The smartphone and tablet game business is about a $13 billion business. And if you look at all of those, of course, console's the biggest, mobile the second biggest. All of them are growing with a couple of nuances, but the PC free-to-play and mobile are fastest growing. So what's common to those two? They're both running a free-to-play microtransaction model, and that's the fastest growing business model in the world. Now, some amazing facts from my perspective. One is, and this is the first time this is true, games are growing in every major geography. We've often seen situations where Japan's in decline, North America's rising, and vice versa. Latin America, Western Europe, North America, Asia are all growing and growing rapidly. And according to Magid, this is the first time in recorded researchable history of the game industry where more than half of every game age group are gamers. So more than half of those 8 to 11 are gamers. And more than half of those 55 to 64 are gamers. That is stunning. Never, ever, ever been true before. And as I said before, this whole digital thing is absolutely killing it. I've got some data on the various digital businesses, DLC on PC, DLC on console, mobile, social, free-to-play MMOs, pay-to-play MMOs. And if you take a look at the last 2 years, just those digital revenue streams, which is about close to half the industry at this point, USA up 52%. Germany up 39%, UK up 32%, France up 38%. China's up so far, but I don't believe the numbers, so I'm not going to give it to you right now. But what we've got is a boom unlike anything I've ever seen. If you break down the individual components of these various digital revenue streams, only one is down, and that is pay-to-play MMO. And that should not be a surprise because almost as fast as you can blink an eye, another premium MMO switches from the premium subscription model to some level of microtransaction or pay-to-play model.
I think there's only one of those left, right?
Yeah, one of those left. So not a big surprise. Last couple of data points. One is, let's look specifically at console. This is a data point that surprised me a little bit. Over the last 3 years, one of the research companies has been tracking people that play every single week. And the number was 29% 3 years ago. 29% of the people, total audience plays every week on console. Last year, or 2 years ago, excuse me, it was 31%. And the last 12 months, it was 30%. So console usage is about the same. Now, I think that's particularly stunning, given that we're on year 8 or 9, depending on how you count it, on a console transition, where we should all expect pretty significant declines, and we're not really seeing that. And of course, within this context, there's a bit of a news flash. You probably all saw Take-Two's results. 29 million copies of GTA. That's a record of records. I believe when people do the math, that's going to show up to be the largest entertainment product launch in history, going back to Tale of Two Cities, 1850-something. Nothing has had more impact than that. It's bigger than Star Wars launch, Harry Potter launch. It's bigger, among the same demographic as people my age watching 60 Minutes on a Sunday. It's twice the size of the Super Bowl.
It's like Las Vegas, right?
And it's just friggin' amazing. Now, within this sort of console usage being flat. One of the things to keep in mind, the big are getting bigger, so it's harder to make money for anybody other than the biggest brands. But the biggest brands, make no mistake, are bigger than they've ever been. So, quick headline, huge industry, growing. All the sectors looking pretty solid right now, when I know we're going to get into the new console launches. And other than pay-to-play MMO, you're in a good spot if you're making games.
So there was sort of this sour attitude leading up to E3 about, whether we've seen the last of the consoles as well. That sort of changed as, more interesting boxes got announced. How do you sort of feel then about what these numbers mean when it comes to either consoles or mobile games? And I guess the implication here is that seems like a very wrong question to you.
So the headline of this presentation, mobile versus console, is not the right question. I'm going to try to speak directly to that right now. And the number of people that have come up to me in recent months and years and said console is over. And I think it's the wrong question for a bunch of reasons. But I think ultimately, and I think when I'm going to finish this, I think gaming in your living room with a big screen and a controller in your hand is not going away soon. I can't be sure 20 years from now it'll be Microsoft and Sony making the hardware, but I believe that's going to be very strong. But let me give you some insights into why I believe that. First off, why is it the wrong question? First off, we've gone from about 200 to 300 million gamers globally less than a decade ago to about 1.2 billion gamers today. We've seen a giant explosion in the number of gamers. We've seen strong annual growth each and every year. What I believe we're seeing right now, in terms of the secular decline of the console, or the cyclical decline of the console, et cetera, is very similar to every cycle going back to the first PS1. It's exactly the same degradation rate. The difference is it's been a couple years longer to get new hardware consoles. But I'm going to start with the worst data point you could possibly imagine to sort of unmake my point. If you take a look at that same data about how about 30% of people play games on console agree, if you isolate just the players that are heavy players on tablets, you see a pretty strong degradation on console. So that's a data point that I think people will pick on and say, well, wait a minute, doesn't that mean the tablet is replacing console? And I suppose so. But frankly, there's a thought for you. Ford is having the best year ever on pickup trucks right now. And if you just studied people that bought Chevy trucks, you would find that they're actually not using Ford trucks as much as they used to. There's a constant ebb and flow of gamers in and around things. So if you isolate around the heavy users of one, they're quite consistently lesser users of something else. In my household, if I have, we have, Cocoa Puffs in my house, kids love it. There's a high market share, something else gets traded up, and then something else comes back in. But for what it's worth, I think the data will play itself out to show the following. Mobile is on the rise. More of it than you'd ever imagine as new users coming into the market. But also traditional gamers are using tablets and phones and adding to their gaming spending. If you look at the data more specifically, you'll see a degradation in terms of unit sales, dollar sales at retail of console. It is following a very consistent path to what we've seen in prior cycles. But where are we now? We're standing today 2 to 3, well, depending on which console, 2 to 3 weeks in front of the next generation console launches. And a couple data points here that are worth paying attention to. And again, I wrote these down. Last time now, Xbox did 607,000 units through in North America in their first holiday season, 4.5 million in their first 14 months. Sony did 687,000, 3.2 million. Now go back and listen to what EA, was that?
US or?
US, what are the US numbers? If you go back and look at what EA, Ubi, and others have said, and you go back and listen to what GameSpot has said and others have said, this is absolutely unequivocally clear. The demand for these things is so high based on pre-orders. I'm quite confident that we're going to see more sell-through on Sony and Microsoft, the core game boxes, in the first 4 to 5 months than we saw the last time around in the original 14 months. So more volume in 5 months than we saw last time in 14 months. And based on the forecast that the major console players are putting out there and retailers, expect 20 to 30% software growth in calendar 14. What is that telling you? We got a robust free-to-play market. We got a robust mobile market. They're both going through the roof. But at the same time, we are seeing the early indications of a console resurgence starting 2 to 3 weeks from now. Now, will it last 5 or 10 years? It's a fool's errand to ask a question about 5 or 10 years. But right now, it's a great time to be in either.
So what is that? Here's a question you haven't answered before in different talks you've done since leaving EA in March, right? So what does this mean for EA?
Yeah. Well, before I get too specifically into EA, let me just point out that we just listened to very robust numbers from Ubi, from Take-Two, and EA. So right now, sort of all the naysayers that were predicting the demise of the major console players, they're not seeing it. In fact, they're seeing record numbers. And if I think about EA, I have to say that the management team there is doing a great job. Think about this. In calendar 12, the management team delivered $1.7 billion in digital revenue. $1.7 billion. And yesterday they reported in their current quarter 39% growth. Now this is the same management team that cut the title slate down 6 years ago from nearly 60 titles down to about 14 on console. It built the digital business simultaneously to really allow the company to surge forward. Andrew Wilson was we had this gigantic meeting in New York. We called it our burning platform meeting. We thought we were in the same position as THQ, going back to 2007. And this is the team that's delivered the company to 39% growth. And think about $1.7 billion last year. $1.7 billion last year was bigger than Gung-Ho, bigger than Supercell, bigger than just about anybody in digital. In fact, I think it was bigger than anybody in digital. And 39% growth on top of a number that big, that is not a small feat. And it's still Peter Moore, it's still Frank Chabot, it's still Patrick Sutherland, it's still Andrew Wilson, and it's still Gabby Toledano. It's a great team doing great things.
Does that make you feel a little validation?
I think it's a lot of validation for the blend, right? If console's working and digital's working, what's not to like?
So on the broad industry, you commented at Casual Connect about sort of this imbalance between the valuation that's been created in the last 6 years or so by the platforms like Apple and Google, and then the valuation that's been created in the content industry. What are some follow-up thoughts to that?
So Dean's referring to a comment I made at Casual Connect when I pointed out that around the ecosystems of iOS and Android, at least a reasonable interpretation is about $300 billion in market cap has been created for Apple and for Google. And normally we say in our world that sort of content is king. And you would expect if content were king, that if $300 billion was created on the platform side in terms of value, maybe $500 billion would have been created on the content side. But at best, when I add up all the players operating in the application side of the ledger, I get $25 billion, maybe 28 if you now look a little more carefully at Supercell after the Taizo-san and Masa-san made their big investment there, which is a very smart move. And so it's literally less than 10% of the value has been accrued to the content makers. Aside from finding that sort of an insult, I find that frustrating. I'm very happy for Google and Apple to have their great valuation. I just think the content side needs to get more and can get more. And
does this suggest that the power really is still in the hands of the platform guys?
The power and leverage, but there's some things that we haven't yet done in mobile, and something I've been talking a lot about of late is there's only a couple things you can do to drive more value into content, drive more value, more profitability, more consistently profitable businesses. I'd say perhaps the most important, and we haven't yet seen this, is the building of great brands. Now, I, like the rest of you, like Candy Crush. You can find me, with my 2,000 trophies up with, Clash of Clans and lots of other games that I love to play. But the question is, will these brands be, or will these products be brands, or will they be here 10 years from now? Remember, Mario's 34 years old, Battlefield's 11 years old, The Sims is 13 years old. Even young products like Call of Duty is over a decade. GTA is about a decade and a half. These are products that deliver year in and year out, have created brand status to the point where I was ready to buy GTA 5 long before I knew what was in the box. And if EA hadn't already sent me Battlefield 4, I'd have lined up for it. I mean, people want these because they are brands. The question is, are we in mobile going to just exhaust people? So you stop playing the game, and you get so frustrated you're ready to throw your iPhone or Android device through the window because they've extracted a lot of money and they haven't innovated after the first 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 hours of gameplay. There's a lot of risk involved in that. We can talk a lot about what it takes to build a brand. And, so far it hasn't happened. There's some awfully smart people in mobile, and they will get there. But it's going to require doing some things where they're going to have to truncate some of the monetization they're getting in the near term to build a business for the long term around innovation, execution, and making sure that they, use technology in the right way. We'll see that come together. It hasn't come together yet. It needs to happen.
And I've heard sort of a byproduct of this brand power is also leverage and power in the market. That say Apple does compete with Netflix, but it doesn't necessarily push Netflix around.
Now, I think brands change the leverage point dramatically. There's also something a little self-destructive in games right now, which is the CPI model. More or less, I've been told there's 5,000 developers, and there's, a couple dozen people promoting the CPI model. The supply-demand equation for driving installs is far in favor of the guy selling access versus the guy with the game or the gal with the game. And that's a problem right now because pretty much CPI today for many developers equals LTV. In other words, their lifetime value is being given away in the install process. That's a shitty model. It doesn't lead to long-term value. We're going to need to see that shift. Right now, the analytical work that I see a lot of content developers doing on the mobile side results in them overpaying for CPI because they think that 1 week, 2 week, 4 week look backs essentially assigns all the value for the install to the place where the install took place as opposed to all the rest of the things that are happening with word of mouth and advertising. So I think there's a bit of a loss there. But if we're going to see value driven on the mobile side, and we will, it's going to be around branding and building the innovation to deserve that branding so that these products will be around a decade from now. And it's going to be around shifting some of the things around CPI. And I know we don't have much more time, but we're also going to need discovery platforms beyond, really what happens inside of iOS and inside.
We'll take a few minutes longer than we planned, I would like to get to sort of your startup life now and your sort of investing life. And what you view since leaving EA as what's hot or not? What are some of these trends you like? What are some things that you're probably going to avoid?
You're not going to do flashcards for hot or not? It was great today. But, look, I've been pretty stunned by a number of things. I've reviewed probably a little more than 130 companies since I left Electronic Arts, a little more than half a year ago. And it's like jumping into one of the most interesting oceans I've ever been involved in. The level of innovation, excitement, dynamism, aggressive entrepreneurs, it's been fantastic. But I guess a few things have been, pretty stunning to me. One is, while I think some of the best entrepreneurs I've met are working in the game industry, there's a lot of folks that are pursuing Me Too strategies, virtual copycats. I mean, the number of products out there that look like, if I squint, I see Clash of Clans. Or if I squint, I see, Puzzles and Dragons. Or if I squint, I see something that looks like a blend between Bejeweled and Candy Crush. That's not going to lead to long-term value, and it's not going to lead to industry growth, and frankly, it's not going to lead to financial success for the companies pursuing those strategies. There's blue ocean, there's red ocean, and then there's oceans that have been so red that the prior 6 entries have already failed. Why copy that strategy? So while I have an enormous amount of respect, for a bunch of folks, whether it be Natural Motion or it is, that game company, Supercell, or Kickside, that are doing really innovative and different and interesting things. I'm a little depressed by the, if you will, the lemmings that have got so many copies going up. Don't get me wrong.
We need some more social casino games.
What's that?
We need some more social casino games.
I don't know. I'm having a hard time keeping track. That's one thing. The thing I found really interesting is there's a number of ex-game guys, gals that are out there doing really innovative things outside of gaming. I know you got Will White up here in short while. Will's got a really interesting startup. It's more of a social network than it is a game. We'll talk about that at some point, I'm sure. But there's a lot of really smart game guys that are taking all that they've learned about building great content, building a deep relationship, a service relationship with the consumer, and applying it to other sectors. And we're seeing a lot of innovation there. So, the short answer to your question, it's almost nothing more fun than interacting with this many dynamic entrepreneurs. What is also really exciting is the level of innovation that's happening everywhere. And I just encourage those that are out there trying to build a game company to, it doesn't necessarily need to be the bluest of the blue oceans, but just a tinge of blue would be nice, a little more towards the purple maybe, as opposed to just straight copies of what's out there.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.